Everyone wants to be a broker.
Everybody, especially the last 2 years. UPS seems like what? UPS versus Teamsters right now, trying
That's
to
what it
figure
is.
out what's going on there.
Do I
Absolutely.
smell opportunity? I definitely smell opportunity.
Yeah.
And then you feel like you lied to the carrier, and it's like, no, you didn't.
Look, there's a potential for.
There's 50, 30, a week or whatever. It ends up being 5.
Don't use brokers.
Are you trying to fail?
Double brokers.
It's your worst enemy. Hey everyone, and thank you for joining us today on the LTL podcast presented by Franco Logistics. We started this podcast so we can talk about the complexities and what we deal with on a day-to-day basis in the logistics industry. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about brokerages, what to look for, the red flags, so stay tuned.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the LTL podcast. My name is Isao Torres.
And I'm Eric Lopez.
And here we are, man, with our first episode of the LTL podcast. It took us a little bit to get here, but we got this nice setup going now. We got, we got our little coasters ready to go, little pallets. I think we're ready to go. So this episode, obviously, we're new to this stuff. I think it's pretty clear to just throw that out there. This is so new to us, but we're super excited to do it. We've been talking about it for a long time. And here we are, man. I mean, it took us a little bit, but we're here.
We're finally here. We did it.
So this episode of the podcast, we're going to talk about brokerages. That's going to be the topic for today. Okay, so I think it's going to be really interesting. We're going to get into some cool stuff. We're going to get into should you use a broker? Should you not use a broker? What are some red flags that you may, look for if you are trying to move a shipment with a broker, as well as how to build partnerships with carriers and customers, and just that whole bit of running a brokerage and how we do it, but also just tidbits for you, if you're trying to move some shipments with brokers and how to do it and how to find quality brokers. I think that's going to be the name of the game today. So
everyone wants to be a broker.
everybody, especially the last 2 years, I cannot tell you how many videos I saw on being a freight broker. It's super easy. Oh, you can make 500 a load, 1,000 a load. Everybody wants to be a broker.
Yep.
So we're gonna talk about quality brokers, and I think there is a difference. There's a huge difference on whether it's you're just a broker that knows what you're doing or a broker that
That
just
tries to just move anything
for anyone
at whatever price.
whatever price. Exactly. So, but before we get into those topics, I want to go over our first segment. Our first segment being recent news. So, recent news is just what we want to talk a little bit about. Some of the things that we've been hearing, some things that have been going on over the past 2 weeks, maybe over the last month, just things that you should know, especially if you are, in any way shipping product.
Yep.
Right. So, the first thing, let's just get it out of the way. The not so recent anymore, at least for us on the Long Beach and LA area, but
labor
the
strikes.
Labor strikes. That's been across the board what we've been just seeing nonstop, right? So for us, it was Long Beach and LA first. Luckily,
The West Coast, because you still had Tacoma, you still
You're
had
right.
Seattle, all those areas that they were all on board with going on strike, and we got through it.
we got through it. They came to an agreement. What was it? Maybe about 2 weeks ago now.
It's give or take 2 to 3 weeks.
So that part's out of the way. So we're hopeful that we're starting to see, or we're going to start seeing some cargo headed back to the West Coast. But of course, someone's not out of the woods just yet, right? We still have our neighbors up north that are dealing a little bit with that ILWU, just that negotiation process that's been going on that they're currently in. I did read an article. That they are in the works, and I'll pull it up on my phone right now. And for those of you who are watching us on YouTube, thank you guys so much. But for those of you who are listening on Spotify or on Apple, We're gonna try to put some of these articles up that we talk about so that you can see them. But if you are not looking on YouTube, go check us out on YouTube, LTL Podcast. But if you are looking, or if you are on Spotify and the audio versions, I'm going to do my best to explain what I'm kind of looking at here on my phone. So I was watching, or I was looking on LinkedIn. It was a CNBC post, and the post was pretty much saying where they are currently in the Canada negotiation. So as of 3 hours ago,
3 hours ago,
3 hours ago. So
they're that up to date.
so we're talking about recent news here. A letter was sent out by the ILWU that pretty much says, "Dear Longshore locals, on Tuesday, July 25th, which is this upcoming Tuesday, there will be a stop work meeting for the 8 a.m. shift to recommend the terms of the settlement of the membership." So hopefully, come Tuesday, July 25th, they can come to some sort of agreement and we can all be cheering and happy for the entire West Coast.
Yeah. And then we'll be free and clear for a few years. We got 6 years. I don't know if they're looking at 6 years. Um,
Probably.
give or take 4 to 6 years is the usual, but you know, it is a struggle. So we're thankful here we didn't get that much of a strike.
Yeah.
We had a couple
Some
instances
slowdowns.
where there was some closures on both sides, whether it was coming from the terminal or the ports or the longshoremen themselves. But you know, we didn't get affected that bad. I think the effect came really from the fear
Yeah.
of a strike.
Oh yeah, definitely. And so
And
here's my next question to you. Is I know we're two-ish, 2.5 weeks out of, the negotiations with us, but obviously Canada's still dealing with it. When it's all said and done, do we get all of our cargo back? Do we get some? Do we get none?
no, I think some will come back, but there was I had talked to a gentleman from the Port of LA. I won't mention his name, but we had a conversation, and the conversation was pretty much, this is something that's always been happening over the years. And
Mhm.
every time it does happen, some cargo will leave. Part of that will come back, but here at the Port of LA and Long Beach, because of how efficient they can process cargo,
Mhm.
the cargo volumes keep increasing year over year,
Right, right.
right? So it wasn't a couple years ago when we were processing record numbers, and this was even before
The
COVID.
pandemic, yeah.
Even before COVID, they were still processing record numbers year over year, month over month. So that just tells you how important this gateway is, to our national economy,
Yeah.
to cargo flow itself, and we will get some of it back. Some of it won't come back, but I think that's not to say that we can still experience growth without it coming back.
Right. Yeah, and I think kind of what we've seen some customers or some people that we've been kind of paying attention to that during the time of this strike and these I believe what was it, like almost a year long, right, negotiation for us, that they just decided to make moves, not necessarily like, okay, so we're going to move our cargo here and there, but we're also going to move our facility
Mhm.
from California or from the West Coast to somewhere in the East Coast, and
Yeah.
maybe just facilitate more of their cargo down that way. So I do believe we've lost some, but of course, it's LA and Long Beach. We're
I think that had to do more with the pandemic itself. People were
true,
too dependent on one port, and given that we had so many ships out
right?
at anchor, 150,
Yep.
you know, um, people had to start deciding, maybe this is not the smartest thing to put all your
All
eggs
our
in
eggs
one
in one.
basket.
Yeah.
It's not to say that it would happen again the same way, but you still have run that risk. Maybe it is a little bit better to be a little bit diversified and go to another port already, right? So, um, and then you're talking about the labor situation that
Yeah.
now also said, well, if we
Same
already have
thing.
a facility there, why not just start
Yeah.
using it a little bit more?
Right. And the same thing, right? I mean, it goes to just people learning from previous, I mean, you learn from history, right? So even the labor strikes, right? I mean, that's kind of what you were talking about when we were talking about the fear of what was going on, where it's like, I fear that there's going to be a strike, therefore I'm not going to send everything there,
Right.
right? So you live and you try, you learn, and you try to adapt for the next time it
Yeah.
happens. So
Yeah.
that's
Definitely.
necessarily what's going on. So well, we have that, and then as of more recent as well, UPS.
Yeah.
UPS seems like what UPS versus Teamsters right now, trying to
That's what it
figure
is.
out what's going on there. I mean, I did similarly to the ILWU. There is a, if I'm not mistaken, and you can, you can let me know in the comments if I'm wrong on this, but um, next week, or actually in 10 days, if I'm not mistaken, the 31st, I believe it's a Monday. There's supposed to be a strike by UPS or by the Teamsters. Um, but there is a meeting being held Tuesday as well of next week, July 25th or July 24th. Make sure I got that date right. But Tuesday of next week, where again they're going to discuss, hopefully, come up July 25th. Thank you. Um, yeah, hopefully, we'll come up with some agreement, because at the end of the day,
I need my Amazon packages.
yeah,
I'm sorry to
I
say
know I need.
it.
It's I mean, I got one a little bit late on the, and FedEx, right? FedEx has been doing most of the work now, right? Or not most of the work, but they've been taking some of that work.
So they've been taking some of that work, but I've heard, because I it wasn't something I read, but someone read and they told me about it.
Okay,
So
so take this with a grain of salt.
grain of salt, but that FedEx was also apart from them taking it, but they were denying a lot of that work because they just don't have the capacity to
Capacity to
handle
do
it.
it. Yeah, no, it's
Um, so you could just imagine the complications that this labor strike is causing.
yeah, no,
Do I
absolutely,
smell opportunity? I definitely smell opportunity.
yeah.
I mean, that's an area where now here's another one where I just read
Last mile
recently,
delivery.
last mile delivery.
Yeah,
And specifically, parcel shipments, they're also it's one of the businesses where it's has one of the highest success rates. So anyone looking to start a final mile delivery,
actually, what was the
it
number?
might
It's
be
like
the
somewhere in the 80% of
yeah,
success rates, right, for last mile delivery. I mean, it's yeah, and in situations like this where people are now, again, customers, clients, are potentially trying to learn from this experience to say, well, maybe I should diversify. Maybe not everything goes to UPS. Maybe not
right.
everything goes to FedEx. There's a, there's another
You could
guy out
probably
there
throw
that's,
in another option there,
yeah, absolutely.
Mojo final delivery.
Mojo Final Delivery might just get in, yeah, might just get into it. And I mean, I don't know. It's something that we've thought a little bit about as well. So it's definitely something that should be thought about by
Yeah.
anyone who's watching or listening. Um, so that, do you have anything else on the recent news? Anything on the strikes? I mean, for the most part, that's the general gist of it. If you want to learn more, I mean, obviously you can CNBC, Freight Waves, all these different articles. They go out and they really,
JOC,
yeah,
Wall Street.
JLC. They
Yeah.
all give you a lot of. I think Bloomberg came out with the article as well today. Um, so yeah, just make sure you guys are keeping up to date. But for if for whatever reason you don't want to go ahead and look up all these articles and pay all these subscriptions and so on and so forth, we're going to do our best to have as much of that information here um, on our podcast.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So the one thing that I want to talk about. So now let's get into the brokerage. Okay, let's get into a very interesting controversy that I've seen, and I've seen it quite a bit on LinkedIn now. Um, don't use brokers.
Are you trying to fail?
Yeah, don't use brokers. I've seen this.
You're trying to do it yourself, right?
Look, I've seen don't use brokers. So I there's a lot to be said, right? And I understand, right? I guess you could try to put yourself in a customer's shoes where they may be calling a broker, and like we mentioned in the beginning of the podcast, that everyone's trying to be a broker, right?
Right.
So I can see where the misconception of brokers can be, but let's dive into it a little bit.
You gotta do your research. I mean, at the end of the day, like, do they are they a credible broker? How long have they been in business? Do they
Yeah.
know what they're talking about? There's all these things to just start, those kinds of things, as opposed to just, you know, and we get the emails too all the time. It's,
All of the
hey, do
time.
you have shipments? We do all 48 states.
Yeah.
We can go anywhere. And it's like, well,
Well, not just that, but do you do reefers? Do you do flatbed? No, I do it all.
everything, whatever you need.
Whatever you need, I will do. And I'm going to go ahead and read it really quickly just so that we can kind of get a little bit of context of it. But so this don't use brokers kind of approach. It is it's vastly inaccurate. I mean, it's inaccurate,
Yeah.
right? So let me go ahead and just get it real quick here. Okay, so this is what the quote says. So the quote says, "Cut out the middleman." Okay, this is the comment. Cut out the middleman. Why do you need brokers when they do nothing to help move freight? They don't own trucks. They don't own anything. Why use them? Okay, there's a lot of reasons to use a quality broker. First of all, let's talk about the fact that a majority of, and we can call it owner ops, we can call it trucker company. It doesn't really matter. Anyone with a fleet size of let's I think the statistic is less than six. Most people that have less than six, or most operators out there have less than six trucks. Majority. There's some big juggernauts out there, of
Yeah.
course. Um, but for those individuals that have less than six trucks operating, they don't have the resources. They may be driving themselves. They may be, their dispatcher might be in the truck with them, right? I mean, I've
Right.
seen that, families and that operate together. And
Hmm.
my son has a truck, and so therefore I have four trucks.
And then the passengers on the
Is the
laptop,
dispatcher,
and
yeah,
yeah,
is
yeah,
doing trying to find the work and doing this. And that. They don't have the resources to do that. So, and if I'm not mistaken, the statistic is around 90 to 93% of trucks or of carriers that are less than six, have a fleet of less than six, don't or 90, sorry, a fleet size of less than six is the majority of the stuff going out there. 90 to 93% are those kinds of carriers, or not the big juggernaut.
right.
So for those individuals, brokers are absolutely essential.
Oh yeah. I mean, I have a buddy that has his own, trucking company, and
Mhm.
he struggles to find loads, and if he didn't have a broker, he wouldn't know where to start,
Yeah.
and I think that's the reality of it, that the carriers themselves need a broker to get more work. They don't want to stop moving,
Mhm.
and that's what a broker allows them. They have options, right? So, um, I mean, they're essential to them and to the customer. Uh, they provide, or at least they're supposed to provide, right? The knowledge, the know-how,
Right.
what you need, and assist in probably the planning process.
Yeah. And then what about billing? What about invoicing? What about for a customer to get their invoice on time, to for a customer to, let's say a customer is requiring all these systems, right? They have a sort of system that they want you to go through, and the carrier
Right.
doesn't have the ability to, foster in that system.
Yeah.
But a broker that is a well-established quality broker, that's what we do, right? We
Yeah.
do that for them. So it helps the carrier, but it also helps the customer in a aside from just kind of helping them, and uh, giving them the ropes of what they should and shouldn't do. I think a lot of that resource that a carrier doesn't have to be able to fulfill that move is really where a quality broker does shine.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, tracking. I mean, tracking is another thing. I mean, do you
If you
expect
go,
a customer? How many times do we get that customers, they want to know so much about their cargo, rightfully so, but again, a truck driver that's driving his own trucks doesn't have the ability to go back and forth with you all day to try to get you that. And that's what a broker really, again,
right.
another part of the service that comes in.
And like you mentioned, carriers that have less than six trucks, They may have a dispatcher, they may be the same dispatcher and a driver.
Right.
You know, it's complicated, you know. They know what they know how to do, and that's be on the road. Load up your cargo,
Right.
drive the right amount of miles a day, get just enough sleep so that they can continue. Um, and that's what they want to be focused on, you know. They want to get paid on time, get
Mhm.
paid soon, and that's what keeps their business moving. You don't want to be worrying about having to send an email at the time that, you know, they're delivering. They can use a text message with brokers most of the time through TMS systems.
Right.
You know, I mean, it just makes the life of a carrier a lot easier to use a broker. And it should be as just as easy for the customer too, if you have a quality broker.
All right, everyone. So you've made it to the part of the episode where we show you how you can save up to 10% on your first 5 loads. If you're in the world of shipping products, Franco Logistics is here to revolutionize your shipping experience. Hassle-free over-the-road transportation, seamless drayage, and efficient transloading all in one place. Franco Logistics isn't your typical broker. We're a partner, your inland shipping solution that will help take things to a whole new level. Franco Logistics isn't just a broker. We're an asset-based broker with our very own warehousing and transloading facilities, plus a massive drayage fleet of over 150 trucks. We've got all the tools that we need to make your shipping hassle-free. Wherever your goods need to go, we've got you covered. We got a strong connection throughout all major ports in the US with a particular focus in the bustling LA and Long Beach ports. So why stress over shipping when you can work with the best? Head over to francologisticsgroup.com/inquire. Again, it's francologisticsgroup.com/inquire right now and use code LTL pod 10. Again, LTL pod 10 for up to 10% on your first 5 orders. Again, thank you all so much for making it this far into the episode. Now let's get back to the show. Absolutely. So let's talk about what's not a quality broker. Okay. Because this is another thing that I've been seeing. And this is something we've dealt with this for a long time. I think a little bit supercharged over the last 2 years, but double brokering, right? So double brokering, for those of you who don't know what double brokering, essentially when you broker out a load,
It's your worst enemy.
it's definitely your worst enemy. It's definitely your worst enemy. It's where your load can really just get lost, and it can be it just opens up the floodgates for way more deception, way more problems, liability, so on and so forth. So double brokering, if you have a broker and you suspect them of double brokering or brokering out your load after you've brokered it to them, um, definitely reconsider the
Yes.
broker you're using. So let's explain a little bit of what a double broker is.
Okay. So the broker should be the only middleman between the carrier and the shipper or the warehouse that is loading, because the customer doesn't necessarily have to be the shipper, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the shipper can be a warehouse that customer has contracted. So the broker can is going to be the one to get the carrier,
Mm-hmm.
make the pickup, and deliver. What happens in double brokering is that broker brokers it out to what he suspects is a carrier,
Right.
and it ends up being another broker, and they broker that out to a carrier. But the first broker is
And
trying to get updates,
it might be another broker too after
and it
that
might
mix
be
too.
another one. You know, once you pass it on to one broker, the level of complexity of how to recognize if this is
Yeah.
truly being moved the way it was assigned gets even more complicated.
Right.
To get updates, to get more delays, because you don't know how many other, you know, how far this chain goes. Um, and in the worst case of scenarios, it goes far enough to where your load gets stolen.
Yeah, and that's obviously a worst case scenario.
And you try, backtracking this and trying to ask for paperwork and all this stuff, and
Mhm.
it goes sideways.
Yeah, and that's your worst case scenario, and that's where you don't want to be. So anytime you suspect a double broker,
But
reconsider. I
see,
mean,
as a customer though, like it's hard for you to
yeah,
suspect it because
yeah.
you're trusting the broker that you're
No,
assigning to.
I know.
So that's what it comes down to. It comes down to, do you have trust in your broker, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And making sure that the paperwork that they're providing, because the broker's gonna, either the broker or the carrier is gonna generate a bill of lading, which should state the actual carrier's name. And if that carrier is being provided to you by the broker, saying, "Hey," broker saying, "Hey, carrier 123 is picking up this load," carrier 123 shows up,
right,
then your broker's doing the job that they're supposed to. They say broker 123 is showing up, and 456 shows up. You got some questions you should ask.
right. That's your first red flag, and that's where you yeah, you have to start asking the questions. But it's tough. I mean, it's tough for even for even brokers. I was watching I forget where it was. It was a video of someone who had recorded an 8-minute long conversation with they were a broker, and they had brokered the load out to what they perceived to be a motor carrier. They had marketed themselves as though they were a carrier, and that's another huge problem that you see is not just a broker brokering it and brokering it, but it's a broker pretending to be a carrier,
Yeah.
pretending to have a fleet, pretending to have assets. So there was a conversation, this long conversation. He's going back and forth, and the other individual that was pretending to be a carrier was saying was talking as though it was not a problem. So I think that's where kind of a lot of the conversation about like regulation and all that stuff is coming in, where it's like people don't. Whether they know they're doing it or not. They probably know they're doing it, but whether they feel it's just frowned upon or whether they feel it's illegal or not, you know what I'm saying? So
Right.
I think that's where the big question comes with the regulations, and I know things that are
Well,
in the
here's an
works.
interesting thing that I read recently. So there's this thing that has become kind of popular now, is dispatchers or
Mm,
dispatching
mm,
services, right? Now, they don't have the legal authority to be a broker. They are, in a sense, just
Jesus,
helping a carrier
dispatchers.
dispatch, right? So they don't have to register as a motor carrier or broker. They don't have to do the same processes. They don't
Jeez.
have to pay the same fees, and they can be dispatchers. Um, and I think I got this information from our insurance. Actually, they send us regulation
Hmm.
news, and they were trying to figure out how to distinguish between the the rights of a dispatcher versus a broker, so that they can determine liability. And it just adds more complexity to an already complex
Welcome to
situation.
logistics.
Yes.
Right? So welcome to that's what this podcast is for. This podcast is to talk about these things, talk about stories. If you have a story and you want to come talk about it, if you want to join it, we've been dabbling into the idea of having guests on the show as well. So if you're interested and you're out there, whether you are in logistics, you're a whatever it is, you have warehouses,
I
you
am gonna
have
say it's BYOM though.
to
You
bring your
know,
own for real, bring
bring
your
your
own
own
mic
mic.
for sure, because we've only got two. All right.
and
This is a new equipment for
and I'm
us.
not sharing, all
I
right?
know.
So
So either one of us comes off or you bring your own mic. But it'd be interesting, to have some people in logistics, whether you are someone who just ships product, whether you're in fulfillment, whether you're in
yeah, what
warehousing.
experiences have you had
Man,
as a shipper? Whether you're shipping through your own warehouse, your own fulfillment, you got your own product, whatever it may be, drop shipping. You know, I'm sure you got some real good stories.
and listen, if you're someone who is someone who double brokers and doesn't know you're double brokering and you want to come on the show and you saw this and you're like, wait, am I doing something wrong? You can give us a call. We'll chat a little bit. But yeah, so I mean, there's just stories
Let
galore,
let's
right? I mean,
let's also point out the fact though, like let's I don't want to be too harsh on double brokering
yeah.
if you
Well,
do it right,
the
because
co-broker,
the
right? Yeah,
co-brokering,
there is the
okay?
co-broker.
There are ways to get around it where you have an agreement. Now, it's again, it's professional. You have to have the right parameters, the right agreement in place to make sure that even though some another broker is going to handle it, they're
Mhm.
professional enough to give it to a carrier. You still have to do your vetting. You
Right.
have to make sure that that broker's giving it to the carrier they're saying.
Clients should know,
Clients should know that you're going to double
right,
broker this
or that
or
you're
give
gonna
it to someone
co-broker it.
else, because you don't want to end
Yes.
up in a sticky
Well,
situation,
let's
lose
get a
your
little bit,
trust.
yeah, absolutely, and let's get a little bit into, because I know there was a big confusion, even when I first started, back then, with co-brokering and double brokering and the differences, and they're very, I mean, minimal differences, really. So it could be confusing as to why you would think that it is okay to do. I mean, it just really comes down to liability and that agreement, right? There is that agreement, and everybody knows what's going on. It's not necessarily like you're doing it without them knowing. It's a client knows that you are going to another broker to get the second part of whatever it is that you're looking for. You brought the client, maybe you don't have the carrier, but the other broker has those carriers that's specific in that lane, and you're
Hmm.
you're able to kind of all cooperate. And then it also comes down to, everyone's not, like your profit margins are shared, things like
Right.
that. So
Right.
there is a misconception. So I'm glad you
Yeah.
brought that up. That co-brokering is a thing. Um,
It's not ideal,
yeah,
but
it's not ideal. It's not something that you should be doing all that often. Because I mean, at the end of the day, if you're a broker, you should be really focusing on those relationships with both, right? Your clients and your carriers,
yeah.
not just one. If you're doing just one, if you're doing just a carrier, you might as well, I guess, be a dispatch service,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, so let's go ahead and, with that being said, we can go ahead and segue to the next topics for today. So which kind of segues into that, carriers and customers, right? How do you, building a brokerage and just having a brokerage in general comes down to this. It comes down to the service. It comes down to the quality service that you have, and what that is,
Hmm.
right? So how do you maintain your relationships with either one, with a carrier or with a customer?
Yeah, and I think we've talked a little bit about this in that other segment
Yeah.
last time. Um, but I do think one of the best ways, at least, given today's market,
Mhm.
is to inform your customers, right? They be part of their supply process, the supply chain process. See, find areas that you can assist without overstepping.
Right.
Not telling them that you can do anything and everything,
Right.
because most times than not, you can't. There's going to be a lane that's going to be a lot more complicated to handle, right? But that given that, if a customer is looking to start a new lane or something different, you should have that relationship so that they can make you aware and you can prepare,
Yeah.
right? Because it all comes down to being a partner. Most customers don't want to be part of that shipping process. They don't want to be focusing
Yeah.
on, they want to make sure they get the product and that they ship it out as soon as possible to where it's supposed to, whether it's a distribution center, their customer's warehouse, or whatever that may be, or their own warehouse somewhere else. Um, you know, and you got to be there to make sure that you know all of it, of how it's going to get there, when it's going to get there, so that you can plan. And I think that's where quality brokers can really differentiate themselves.
Yeah. That's where you thrive a little
Um,
bit more.
a lot of brokers I that I know of know how to move cargo, and they can provide that communication with their customers of ETAs and this and that. But a lot of them don't know how to plan, right? They don't know what it takes. They don't know the logistics of overseas uh, transit times, when it's going to get here, how long it takes to discharge off the vessel, the length of time to, um, or if it goes cross country and you're picking it up at a CFS station, um, all those factors, they're very important that you got to work real close with your
Yeah.
customer, and sometimes they don't know all the information,
Well, yeah,
believe
that's
it
what
or not, you know?
apps all a lot of the times. And if you take one tidbit, one very small tidbit away, um, one thing that transit time is that's probably one of the major services you can provide to a customer. I can't tell you how many times I've had a customer come and say, I need to get this product to Tennessee, to wherever it goes, Texas, wherever, but it needs to get there in this amount of time. What's the best method?
Right.
And if you're not able to satisfy, if you're not able to get that information or have the experience to be able to say, okay, it's going to take X amount of time if I go FT, if I go full truckload, it's going to take X amount if I put it on the rail. It's going to if
Right.
if you don't know how to make those different maneuvers from these locations you're claiming to know, you're already shooting yourself in the foot.
Mhm.
Right there, you have an opportunity that a client is sitting there asking you what's the best method for you to do. It's your greatest opportunity to really provide that quality service that showcases your experience and what you know. Um, and I think that's a big uh, tidbit that you can take. If you are, someone who is a broker and trying
Yeah.
to, trying to get out there. And then, of course, if you're a customer out there, um, you don't need to know everything. I
Yeah.
think that's kind of what
If
you're
you have a
mentioning.
quality broker, if you have a quality partner,
Exactly.
that has the experience, they should be running the show for you. Like, let them do so because, believe it or not, they
Let them do
know
so.
they know a lot,
Mhm.
or they should at
Yeah,
least,
at least they should. Yeah.
Um, how long does it take for cargo to arrive at a CFS station when it gets to,
Mhm.
let's say Port of LA, Long Beach here. Most of the cargo is either going to St. George warehouse, um, or Imperial CFS, one of those two.
Mhm.
I can tell you right off the bat, it's about 10 days from the ETA.
Yeah, and these are things you have to know. And it's not just that. I mean, I've had customers just on a very basic level say, "This is my first time, moving a cargo. It's come here. A customer sending it off to Denver. Um, what's the transit time? When do I have it ready? When can
Right.
you pick it up? Okay, if you pick it up at this point, when are they going to deliver it? There's a delivery appointment that needs to be done. So when a delivery appointment has to be done, how do you juggle that? Okay,
Right.
so and a perfect example, and we'll get into a little bit of story time here, but I had a customer recently that reached out to me. This was their first time ever moving to Kansas, from LA to Kansas. So first time ever. They wanted to set up a delivery appointment. I did advise them that if they wanted me to do that, I can go ahead and do so. So she did give me the reins to do it. They wanted it picked up today, right? They wanted it picked up today, which was not necessarily today, but that day, which was Friday. Um, but there was no delivery time until a week and a half later. There was
Oh,
no appointment for it, but they wanted it out of their warehouse and it was already pooled and they were ready to go. So what do we do in that situation, right? I
yeah,
mean, you're not going to have a carrier hold it for
a week
X amount, a week, for it to, or half a week for them
or
to just hold.
4 or 5 days
So at
because
that point is where you start using your experience and you
right.
start saying, does that carrier have a yard they can leave it at? If so, what's the storage? If there is any storage
Is it
fees,
secured?
is it secured? What kind of security do they have? Luckily, we were able to offer our own facility to bring the
Right.
cargo to us. We would unload it, leave it with us, and then put it back onto a trailer. With the right transit time once that time came. But um, the customer had no idea. Customer was ready to go. Customer wanted it out of their warehouse today, and it wasn't going to be able to deliver for another week and a half. So what do you do there, right? So
Right.
somebody else may have just sent a carrier. That carrier then tries to pick it up, and then you tell them, "Oh, the delivery appointment is not for another week and a
Now
half."
they lied to the carrier and they say, "Oh, can you hold it?
Yeah, can you
Can you
hold it?
hold it?" And some carriers may be willing to, but then you run the risk too is you don't even know if they have a yard.
Right.
They
You don't know
may
how
take it
secure it is.
to a yard that, you know, and drop off the trailer so that they can use another trailer or do something,
Yeah.
like You run way too many risks just by lying to your carrier.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then that kind of goes again to now your vendor relation, your carrier relation, right? Because what kind of relationship do you have with your carriers? If you're a broker and you're going out saying that you have thousands and thousands and thousands of carriers, which you may, right? I mean, that's the thing about a broker. Even for us, okay, I'm not going to sit here and say that we don't at times, at times. Sorry, let me fix this, dude. Trying this thing's broken. All right,
And
and
we're
we're back.
back.
Sorry about that. Technical difficulties with our mic. That's why we say bring your own mic. All right. So what I was saying, in regards to when brokers say, they have tens of thousands of carriers, not to say that you don't, or not to say that a quality broker doesn't have the ability. If someone were to come and bring me a load that says I need to move it to Tennessee or I need to move it to XYZ, I'll find a person to move it. It
Right.
may not be as quick and it may not be as easily as I do other lanes and other places. So I think it's super important that you do identify areas and carriers and lanes and not just fleet types that you really you find yourself in a
Right.
niche that you can truly satisfy a customer, because I cannot stress the amount of times that someone has asked me for a load or asked me for a quote, and let's say it is somewhere where I we don't necessarily have someone within a split second, but and it takes me even 15-20 minutes to quote out. I've already lost a customer.
Yep.
A lot of times these customers just want things, and that rightfully so. I mean, they got a lot going on. That's our job. So
Right.
that's why it's super important that when you're going out and you're getting clients and you're getting out vendors, and you're actually strategically doing it, right? That
Yeah.
you're doing it to where it's these are the lanes that I know this customer goes to. I'm good at these lanes. I can do drive ends. I can do reefers, whatever it is that your niche is, and I can do it, and I can fulfill this service that they're in need for.
Right.
Because it's really nice to be able to, when they ask you for a quote, you're like, oh yeah, easily. I know, and you have a relationship with the carrier so well that you can call that carrier up. You can send them an email, whatever the case is, and you can get that person on the phone right away. You already know your quotes or your rates, and you
Well,
have that
that's the
relationship.
other thing that happens too with some brokers is they know the market so well they can quote out quickly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Customer comes back and says, "Can you pick up tomorrow?" You provided a quote, so they're expecting you to be able to have capacity.
Right?
But then they say, "Oh,
Oh yeah,
uh,
absolutely.
I don't have a carrier right now," or can we pick up Wednesday? Just to buy time so that they can go look for a carrier that's going to
Right.
do it at the rate that they quoted. That happens quite a bit too, and it's not ideal, but
Yeah, no, of course.
like that's where it comes to make sure that you have the carriers for the lanes that you
Yeah.
can move.
Yeah, and then you're being very specific with the clients and the clientele you're also,
Yeah.
soliciting or trying to find. Um but then so now you have so how do you then let's move on a little bit to how do you actually build these relationships with these carriers, right? Aside from what we talked about earlier, where there are some they have 5 or 6 trucks and they may not have the resources to be there really as a help in that sense. But how do you build a relationship to a point where you can call someone on the phone on a Friday that needs to pick up in a few hours? You already know their yard is close, and you're trying to persuade them, or really just build that relationship. And I think for me, at least personally speaking, one of the big things that I focus on is, letting the customer or letting the carrier know that we are not so bound to, okay, the cheapest rate possible. Right? At the end of the day, we want to provide a service to our clients. And yes, we want to do it at a reasonable rate. And then, of course, you have spot market rates and things like that that happen, here and there. But you want to do your best to really, at least I let my carriers know all the time that, look, if something happens and it needs to go up or it needs to go, that rate needs to move, I'm not just going to come back to you and say, okay, well, I'm going to move on.
Right.
I'm going to go to my customer and I'm going to have that conversation. And I think the more that you are involved with the carriers and And, a lot like us, a lot of the organizations, CTA, HTA, where we go and we get to speak to a lot of carriers and what's going on. Um, we get the ability to go to the clients and really teach them and inform them about the market and what's going
Right.
on and when it comes down, when it goes up, and how to really bend for both.
Right.
And I think there's a I don't know, what I would call it, but there's a very important characteristic, I guess, that you would need to really have to be able to maneuver that. And I think we do it really well, and that's the reason that we're able to that we're really able to move a lot of these loads for our clients.
Yeah, and then the other thing too is you build a relationship enough to the point where they trust you're going to give
Mhm.
them enough work.
And you're being honest.
And then you're being honest too.
Yeah.
Like, uh, you can tell them, you know what, hey, my bad, the load got
Hmm.
canceled. I
Exactly.
didn't want this to happen, but and sometimes too, like you gotta be able to compensate them when they don't expect it.
Hmm.
Hey, load got canceled. You know what? We'll pay you 150, $200
Yeah. Sure.
for sending your driver and knowing that it's costing you $200 to keep that relationship
Right.
because you never know when
Yeah.
you're going
And
to
it's
need them in the
worth it.
future.
And
It's
it's
definitely
worth it.
worth it.
And it's worth it. I think Mike, right? Yeah. So I think it's definitely 100% worth it. I mean, it depends again, right? So how much volume you have with a customer, but again,
Right.
you never really know that until you really start moving stuff with them.
And then, I mean, every customer has 1,000 loads, right? So
Every customer
when you're
has a
starting
thousand
out
loads.
a
Oh, how many
quoting,
loads do you have? Oh,
yeah, we have X
we
amount.
import we import X amount, and you're like, oh, and then it starts feeling good, and then you're just like to the point where you have one load and you move one load, and that's fine too because you
And
get
then
to
you feel like you lied to the carrier, and it's like, no, you didn't.
I know. In fact, look, there's a potential for
There's 50, 30, a week or whatever. It ends up being five.
I mean, and then there's it begs the question as to was it something they were just untruthful about, or was it something that needed to change in our service? And I think that's something again where we, a quality broker, going back to that, has the ability to assess that, has the ability to realize when just I mean, just self-auditing, right? I mean,
Yeah,
self-reflecting as a business and going and saying, okay, well, where are the areas that we need to improve? Because again, if you're lying to yourself as a business, as any business can improve. There's
yeah,
always room for improvement. It's just where do you want to make that improvement that year,
yeah.
right? Where do you want to put the resources into that year to become the best that you can be for both, for everyone?
That's true. Now I'm gonna ask you a question just randomly.
Okay,
Where do you think
it's not in my notes.
it's not in your
Oh,
notes?
okay,
So
okay, all right.
this is just straight out right now. Where do you think what's one area we can improve on this year or next year that
Cool. Yeah, 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 for
you've
sure.
noticed throughout this year, whatever we've been doing, like I'm sure we started with some sort of goals this year that now next year we're gonna come around and we're like, oh
Mm,
man, maybe I should have started there,
mhm.
or something you didn't see in the
Yeah.
beginning or you thought was gonna be, a piece of cake and now it's changing or you know,
I think what tends to happen, especially this year, I think, and I don't, I guess I speak for us, where somewhat when things got a little bit slower, at least on the brokerage side of things, where your goal may have been, I'm gonna hit the ground running and get X amount of carriers this year as a network and build this specific lane or build this specific thing out. And I think it got to a point where it was a little bit slow where it started becoming, do I need to get the carrier? Do I need to do this? Or do I need to do that? But I think moving forward now, and I think that's something that we can improve on, extremely is our tenacity of just going, whatever that goal is, that we just got to keep going with it.
right.
And I think it's really that building out the carriers. Um, at least for me personally, we have obviously a team that handles sales and does other things. But for me personally, on the carrier side, is just continuing those relationships. We've done a really good job of keeping and even the ones that we built on so far. Um, to be very, very uh, trustworthy carriers, to be very, very reliable carriers. But I think we just need more of them.
Right.
And I think we just need to continue building that out. And then obviously, ultimately, our services always needs to be looked at and
Yeah.
improved. I think that's just something that, um, we take it day by day. We take it customer by customer, and we really just try. And I think that's a big one as well that we need to steadily keep increasing on. We need to really dissect our timeliness of responses and things like that. So I think
Right.
the team needs to really focus on that.
Okay.
That's what I would say.
Yeah.
And it's not in my notes. That's
So, folks, he's being honest about it because
yeah,
he didn't have it in his notes.
that's honest. So the last thing I want to talk about though, the last thing, and then it goes back a little bit to just I guess it stays. I mean, it's very similar, right? Service. We talked about being that broker that does it all, right?
Right.
And why why I mean, I had seen and then I'll try to pull it up as well. So hopefully we can get this up. But the conversation was okay. It's so interesting. So it's titled "Don't Be That Broker." Okay, so don't be that broker, and it's quoted. I specialize in flatbed, dry van, reefer, heavy haul, bulk, and expedites in Southwest, Midwest, Northeast, Southeast, and Southwest, and Southeast. Um, and I mean, essentially, don't be that broker, right? So, like we mentioned before, we understand where you're trying to get business.
Yeah.
You're trying to get business, but it in no way, shape, or form are you ever going to be able to service every single location, every single city, and every single type.
I have a boat that needs to move from New
Yeah,
York
let's try that one.
to the West Coast.
Brokers, if you're
Um,
out there,
Heavy hauls or out of gauge, let
it's
me know.
it's you need to find a niche, right? And I think that's and I don't mean find a niche like, okay, I'm gonna just do LA to Texas
Right.
and limit yourself. But you need to get as much information with specific locations because I mean you need to know not only can I move this, but what happens in a breakdown? What happens if you get the situation where the delivery appointment is now moved? What do you do then? Do you know any facilities around there? They're stuck in Oregon and you're not from Oregon, but do you know facilities around there?
Right.
Do you know yards around there where you can kind of make those adjustments and those moves? So I think finding a lane or being specific on a lane is more than just can I get a carrier to move it from LA to Texas?
Yep.
Right. It's or LA to Dallas or LA to Houston or whatever the case is. I think it takes a lot more of that. And that's the reason why at the end of the day, if you're a customer, I know that you have a lot more and better things to be doing than trying to, find that trying to go and trying to get everything in supply chain, or
Right.
the logistics process. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's
Don't don't be that broker.
just don't be that. We'll just end it there. At don't be that broker. All
Don't be
right.
that broker.
All right. Awesome. Well, look, this is going to do it for today's episode of the podcast. We're very, very, I mean, I think it went well. We're very excited to put this out. If you're watching this, comment below. If you're watching it on YouTube, if you're watching it on Spotify or any other platforms,
What are other topics that you would be
yeah,
interested to hear?
yeah.
You
What should we?
know, and let us know about your stories as well. Like what have you been through with a broker?
Yeah, actually, there you go. That's a good one. Let's put that question out there. What has been your experience with a broker? That's
Whether
a good
positive
one.
or negative, I don't know.
Whether
We want to
positive or
hear.
negative. Yeah,
And if it's
exactly.
negative, we definitely want to
We
hear.
definitely want to hear it. All right, then. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today. This is, again, the LTL podcast. And I think that's going to close us out today.
Signing off.
There we go.